that than I am, let's say, on a musculoskeletal thing. So, but if you put it in the context of structural or musculoskeletal, typically I advocate doing full spine and then bilateral in that context. Okay, so I'm feeling Dr. Trishaw's cervical spine. Feels pretty good. Although it feels like it's a little bit jammed on the right side. Is that sensitive in there? Everything is sensitive. Well, that kind of makes it.
That makes it tough.
That makes it more difficult. That's sensitive in there.
And that looks like it hurts more.
So it feels like about C2, C3 on the left, and then occiput C1 on the right. So as we did last week, if I chose to correct occiput C1 on the right that's jammed, using C1 as my lever, then this can be down, and I'm going to come in and make my correction like that, right? Mm-hmm. Which is kind of an indirect contact, because the lesion, you're not really touching the lesion per se directly. If I decide to use the occiput as a lever, then I'm going to reach around, make this kind of a contact, keep the head up, and then make my slack out that way. That's a little bit more direct because my forearm is actually on the lesion, in relationship to that. So those are the things that we kind of went over last week in relationship to suboccipital and then upper cervical. So the stuff for today was the long axis extension. So as I mentioned, you can do a measure of traction by using your thenar eminences, right, where you kind of come in like this and then pull back. You can also, although I don't really advocate using your fingers like this, because after a while your fingers just kind of cramp and you have the potential to kind of pull suboccipital hair. Doesn't like that. Or you could just use your middle finger. So I tend to come in like this because my middle fingers are longer. They're in the suboccipital ridge. I tend to have, like a square here so that I can pull back. And I usually put my arms on my knees, so that I can hold and pull back. So I can, get some amount of pressure. My thenar eminences on the zygoma or the parietal temporal area, so I'm not really on the TMJ. So you can kind of see Dr. Trishaw's feet. I get my slack out and it comes back like that. So I can tend to hold that for some period of time. Usually, it's not going to be very efficient to hold it for very long because it's kind of a hard hold. And so, in addition to using the extension or the traction correction or manipulation, you can use a towel. Probably with Dr. Trishah, you just grab her hair.
I wouldn't do that.
So if you want to use a towel, you can kind of fold it in triples or over a little bit more like that. Let me see. Behind it here. So I'm in her suboccipital area. I want to make sure that I don't squish her ears. And I can kind of pull back like this and either kind of hold close to the head. Sometimes you can kind of wind it, but if you wind it, there's a propensity to kind of make the head rotate to the side that you wind. So you have to be careful about that. So then I can lift up and just kind of pull back. And you can see that I can get a pretty good pull on. And just my body weight just going backwards allows me to get a pretty good amount of traction. So this is not something that I would hold for a really long period of time. It's just something that allows me to get a little more traction to say, have them indicate, yes, that felt good, or no, it didn't. So if it felt good, then using cervical traction, like at home over the door jamb, and then they have other types where people lay supine, and they have a harness that hooks them up, and it kind of helps facilitate extension, which helps to return the lordotic curve. And you would know, yes, this is indicated. Or if they say, no, man, this really hurts, then it's not indicated. So in the same way that the cervical spine compression and distraction tests, if it's cervical spine distraction is positive because they have a strange sprain of a ligament or a muscle, traction may not be the best because that's just putting them in that insulted position. But if they have a nerve root, a facet, or a disc issue where there's degenerative arthritis, this is going to feel better because it's going to traction it up, right? Okay, so as I mentioned, as I go through my cycle, and this is the last thing typically that I do, so I've done my cervical manipulation and whatever other circumstance that is called for. And I usually come in and I'm usually using my middle fingers are on the facets, on that articular pillar. And I can start at the top and go down. Then at the bottom I come back up, doing this like a circle. And typically I think the circles that I make are usually towards myself, rather than kind of away. It just seems to be better to go this way. So I kind of make my circles. And then I kind of come back. And as I come back, my middle fingers are again in that suboccipital area. trying to make sure that I'm not like, pulling on hair and that kind of thing. Take my slack. My thenar eminences are on the zygoma, so I'm not on the mandibles. Pull back, and then just take my thrust like that. So when I take my thrust, I'm not winding up where I let go and then pull again. And I'm not pulling her head kind of up like that. I'm following that's why it's called long axis extension, because I'm following the long axis of the spine, and I'm extending it or I'm tractioning it in relationship to that. So it could be probably called long axis distraction, but I just tend to call it long axis extension. So that's pretty much it. I tend to assume to some degree, like a fencer's position when I do it. There's are times, particularly if I'm wearing cowboy boots, because I can lean back like this much better. I can do the thrust. But what's that?
I wear cowboy boots.
Yeah. But in any case, I tend to be more in instead of standing like this, I don't think I have as much oomph as I'm standing back like that in a kind of a fencer's position. Okay. All right. Any questions?